a sponsor tonight, Cadenza Coffee. They are located here in Houston, down on Houston Avenue. All right, let's go on to why you are here. And again, before we start, I just want to refresh your memory on the different types of concoctions that you can use to access the medicinal properties of plants. So there's a quick list here, but a poultice, it's simply crushing up the plant and slapping it on your skin somewhere. Occasionally the crushed up plant will be put between two pieces of gauze to kind of keep the mess down some, but mainly it's just chewing up the plant or mashing up the plant, putting it in the blender with a little bit of water, grinding it up, and then applying it externally to the body. A tisane is what most people call a tea. When you just take the plant and soak it in hot water for a while to extract the beneficial compounds that way. Now, if you call a non-Sensinea plant containing infusion a tea to a general herbalist, they might get a little cranky. They like using the term tisane. Technically, a tea, it has to involve the Sensinea plant, but a tisane is any sort of plant hot water combination. A tincture is when you soak the plant in some form of alcohol, consumable alcohol, ethanol. So brandy or vodka or Everclear, depending on what you're extracting and the type of plant you're extracting it from. So a tincture is just an alcohol infusion of a plant. Now an elixir is when you add honey to the tincture, and usually it's 1 part plant, 1 part alcohol, and 1 part honey to get the, a big part of that is just to sweeten the flavor. There are some really bitter medicinal herbs out there, and so adding honey to it, like Mary Poppins says, kind of makes the medicine go down. Actually, I guess that was a teaspoon of sugar, wasn't it? Well, we're healthier in this household, so we'll go with honey. Now, an oxymel, that's kind of an interesting. That is a mixture of vinegar and honey. Usually the vinegar will be some sort of apple cider vinegar or malt vinegar rather than just your plain white vinegar. But then you have the sour and the sweet, and that's used for, again, depending on the actual chemicals that you are trying to draw out of the plant. A syrup is where you take the plant, make a tisane out of it, and then boil it down with sugar to make a sugar-rich syrup. Again, this is used in the case of a number of bitter compounds. Like last week we talked about horehound. By itself, horehound tea is pretty harsh, but when you get enough sugar in there, it becomes actually somewhat tasty. A liniment, that is an external way of applying medicinal plants again. In this case, you are soaking the plant material in a non-consumable alcohol. So not ethanol, but usually isopropanol or rubbing alcohol. So you don't want to drink it. You just want to apply it to the outside and let the alcohol kind of evaporate away and let the plant chemicals absorb into your skin. This leads us to the oil infusion, where you soak the plant material in something like olive oil or safflower oil or sunflower oil or palm oil, depending on what you're trying to extract, and then use that as the delivery system. Usually the infused oil, again, is done externally, especially on like inflamed skin or rashes, things of that nature, not really taken internally, to my knowledge. And then a salve is when you start adding like beeswax to the oil infusion to stiffen it up, make it more firm, so a creamy solid at room temperature rather than a runny oil. And it's just to help kind of keep it where you put it, make it a little less messy. So those are the main sort of concoctions that you would use to get the medicinal properties from the plants. And as we talk about the plants tonight, I'll be telling you which of these concoctions is best suited for the plant. So any questions at this point? Is the volume okay? No one has said anything about the volume, so I think we're doing all right. All right, so let's move on to the plants. And horse mint. All right, horse mint is a really neat plant. I don't think we talked about horse mint last week. I was trying to remember if we ended there or not. But one of the particular claims to fame I have with horse mint and really love horse mint is because a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago in the city of Houston. It was reported that a large crop of marijuana was growing in one of the city parks. And so the police came and started tearing out the marijuana plants. And darkness fell, night fell, and so they stopped. And then the next morning, a new crew of police officers were sent out to finish the job. When they got out there, there's no marijuana here. It turns out the plant they were tearing out was horse mint because it has a very pungent smell, very herbal, thymol sort of smell to it that someone either thought was marijuana or knew was not marijuana, but wanted to see what the cops would do. Anyway, what happened next was the news agencies got a hold of this story and thought, "Oh, let's make fun of Texas." So this story about the cops pulling up all these horse mint plants went nationwide. And they all linked back to my webpage for the horse mint. So in less than a 24-hour period and about an 18-hour period, I had over 32,000 hits to the Foraging Texas website because the police officers made the mistake of thinking horse mint was marijuana. There's basically two here. And I'm going to butcher the Latin name. I was never an altar boy long enough to really get good at Latin, but Mandara punctata and citradora. Basically the purple one and the spotted white one. Now, the uses, the leaves and flowers, they are a very strong antimicrobial. They contain a chemical called thymol, which is also in oregano. So if you're familiar with the smell of oregano, that's what the horse mints smell a lot like because they are very rich in the thymol. This thymol is an antimicrobial agent. It's very good at killing bacteria. It's also anti-inflammatory, so it helps reduce swelling. It's a diuretic. It makes you go pee. It's an expectorant. So if you're having the lung cheese from a bad cold or bronchitis or something where your esophagus and all that is just gummed up with chunks of goo, a tea from the horse mint will help loosen that up and help you expel it more easily. It is also considered a bitter tonic. It's not like horehound or some of the others, but being a bitter tonic, it does stimulate appetite by stimulating the production of bile from the spleen and gallbladder. And just again, a word of warning, if you have some sort of blockage in your bile duct, you don't want to take horse mint because you don't want to start pumping bile down a tube where there's no exit from that tube. So if you have an obstructed bile duct, don't take horse mint. The general way of taking this, again, is a tisane or a tea where you just take the plant, ideally dried, because when you dry the plant, it helps break down the cell walls so the thymol and the other beneficial molecules can get out. But take it, especially when you are having colds or congestion, some sort of bacterial infection, that sort of thing. It'll be starting to show up here really mid-February in the Houston area and kind of work outwards from there, but it is a spring, summertime plant being in full bloom even on April 1st, apparently, if you can, kind of find it in the parks apparently then. So springtime plant, spring, summer, the tea or tisane is really, really good for microbial infections, both external and internal, and for just the general cold symptoms. No questions?
Lots, actually.
Oh, lots. All right, let's cut over to Merriwether.
All right, so first one is another name for horse mint dragon's beard, or am I thinking of something else?
Ooh, common name. I am not familiar with the name dragon's beard, but that does not mean it isn't called that. That's common names can vary quite a bit across the country, so sorry, can't help you on that one. Next.
All right. How do you know how much horse mint to use for which issue?
Okay, that's always a tricky thing. But trying to think which book. Oh, okay. Uh, Basic rule of thumb. Can you hand me? I'm looking. Pardon me. Ah, there we go. I'm looking. Whoop, knocking. So I'm working on a medicinal plant book here, and I got some copies. Just don't want to give you the wrong information here. But okay, I'm just looking at. So one of the things would be, oops, standard dosages. Okay, when you are doing an infusion, okay, you know what? I don't have the amount here. Gargle 1/4 cup, 2 cups. Okay, I need to add that. But a basic rule of thumb is start with a half teaspoon of dried plant material in a cup of hot water, really under 200 degrees. Put the half teaspoon of dried plant material in the cup, add the hot water, put a cover over the cup, let it sit for 10 minutes or 30 minutes if you can. The longer it sits there, the more that'll be infused. And then start sipping that and see what happens. The thing with thymol is it is pretty strong medicine, so you can overdose it if you drink lots of it. So I would say start with half a teaspoon in a cup, see how that affects you. After about an hour, if you haven't seen any effect, take another cup with a half teaspoon, but really don't exceed more than 4 cups of the tea, each with a half a teaspoon in there. And after the first day, it'll give you an idea of what you need to get the effect. So, but yeah, the part of the issue with herbal medicines is that from plant to plant, the amount of the active components can vary. So it's not like a pill form where you know exactly how much medicinal compounds are in it. So there's a little bit of trial and error with your plants after you've dried and harvested them. But a half teaspoon in a 1 cup, measuring cup of hot water is a good basic starting point.
So how does oregano compare in use and strength of good molecules?
Oregano is pretty much on par with horse mint. It's not as pretty though, but it is easier to access. So replacing oregano for horse mint when you have a cold will work. So you can go to the store, or better yet, someone else to go to the store and get oregano and have the same effects. The horse mint actually has a slightly higher concentration of thymol. It's one of the highest concentrations of thymol found in plants, but the oregano has a lot of the same properties, medicinal molecules in it, so it will work pretty much the same way. But again, start with half a teaspoon in 1 cup of water. Okay.
For those in the hill country who suffer from cedar allergies, would this help them, especially for coughing?
Okay, cedar allergies. The main thing it will help with is if you have a lot of drainage, it will help control that some. But overall, especially right now, if you saw the post I made earlier this week, it looks like the cedar trees in the hill country are on fire. There's so much pollen is drifting in the air. For the cedar allergies, I would fall back on goldenrod tea, which is something we talked to. I don't know if, no, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Oh, it might be coming up here. But yeah, the goldenrod tea would be much better for the cedar fever type things and allergies in general.
Last question. Do you just pick the flower petals off for tea, or how do you harvest properly?
All right, first off, hey, we can go to foraging Texas. So I want to scroll down and find horse mint, because part of it is knowing how much you can actually take. Oops, is that coming up? Okay. So when we look at foraging Texas, there's an abundance code. And you see the abundance code, it's underneath the scientific name there. It says it's uncommon. If the abundance code is uncommon, that means don't take more than 10% of the colony of the plant. Because horse mint does grow in a colony. Usually you'll find a lot of it together, but only take one out of every 10 plants. When you take it, use a sharp pruning shears and cut it down close to the ground, and take the whole, because you want the leaves and the flowers both. Take those and hang them somewhere to air dry. Tell you what, if you would, Merriwether, quick take your camera and point it at the stuff hanging from our window, or so yeah, right now, normally, well, down a little, perfect, right there. Okay, that's plantain, that's not horse mint, but normally I have all sorts of plants hanging from there. Okay, and perfect. Okay, so yeah, take just one out of every 10 plants, cut it at the stem, leave all the leaves and flowers on there, hang it up to dry in a bundle, a loose bundle, hang it someplace in a cool, dry, out of sunlight area. And after about 2 weeks, it'll be ready for being made into a tea. During those 2 weeks, there are enzymes who are breaking down the cell wall of the leaves and the petals and so forth. So then when you put it in the water, the chemicals have escape paths. Anything else?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Okay, so back to the presentation. I also meant the horse mint. It's an antispasmodic. In this case, it's mainly for coughing. So it will help some with the coughing, again, kind of like horehound. It's not an antispasmodic in like dealing with epilepsy or things of that nature, not like the cocklebur we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. So antispasmodic, especially for the bronchial system, and a carminative to help just settle an upset stomach. So if those are the sort of symptoms you have, then the horse mint will be good for that. But again, in the case of cedar fever with the cedar pollen, you really don't need the thymol, so the goldenrod would be a better choice. Oops. Okay, next, Japanese hawkweed. This is very common right now. A lot of people think it's just some miniature form of dandelion. It's not. It's in the same family as dandelions. But one thing you'll notice that the Japanese hawkweed on the stem will have multiple flowers, whereas a dandelion will only have one flower per stem. Now, some recent research that I found on this is kind of interesting. So being in the dandelion family, it is one of the bitter greens, so it does have that bitter tonic, that stimulation of appetite through stimulation of bile. But it's also an antitussive, so that's another way, a fancy way of saying a cough medicine. So a tea made from the Japanese hawkweed mixed with the horse mint would be a really powerful cough suppressant, I would think, and that might be what you need for cedar fever. And then it is also a fever reducer. So if think of it as almost a non-aspirin form of aspirin, or a plant that is kid safe when the kid is having a fever. Now, obviously, if the fever is up, over 108, you want to get the kid to emergency room. And frankly, my kids hate this, but I work on the theory that a fever is there for a reason. The body is, upping the temperature because it makes it harder for the invading microbes to live. And so generally, I don't like giving things to reduce fever unless it's starting getting up, above 105, in which case then, give them a tea, but, still keep an eye on things. But the Japanese hawkweed, you'll find it in yards. It likes mowed areas. It likes fence lines. A lot of people, like I said, mistake it for a dandelion. The leaves look like a dandelion leaf. The flower looks like a dandelion leaf, but the flowers are very, very, very tiny. But the leaves, dried, made into a tea, stimulates appetite, but also helps suppress coughing and reduces fever. It started showing up a few months ago. Certainly by October, I was starting to see it. And it will go through really the cold weather, so into April it'll probably be around. And you can harvest it the whole time and just take the leaves and dry them. Very common plant. Okay, lyre leaf sage. This is a neat plant. I've started seeing this growing around in the ditches around Houston and heading up into East Texas, up towards Athens and Martin Dice Jr. State Park. You can't harvest it in the park, but I've seen it around there. Actually, I see this a lot of places. Oops. Let me just, okay. So the leaves are a laxative. So, keep that in mind. Part of the laxative properties is just due to the fiber content. It does have a fair amount of fiber in it. From an edible point of view, it's used as a spinach substitute, but it will help keep you regular if you include it in your diet. This is another antitussive, so cough suppressant. And then antibacterial, but the leaves themselves are fairly weak. They're a lot of better. The horse mint, reishi, a lot of things, turkey tail mushrooms, those are all better antibacterials. Now, the root of the lyre leaf sage, when made into a tisane or an infused oil, is shown to really speed up the healing process of wounds. So if you have a cut or anything where you would normally put neosporin on it on the Band-Aid and wrap it up, the lyre leaf sage, tisane, so a wash from that or gauze soaked in it, put over the wound for a while, will help speed up the healing process. It's really cool. You find this in the fall through the spring. Once you see it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Now, the Native American name for this plant was cancer weed, because when it shows up, it starts covering the ground and blocking out everything else. And it has this, you can see in the picture, kind of hopefully you can see, this weird purple sort of mottled look to it. And to the Native Americans, it looked like a skin cancer. The different Native Americans, most of their medicinal beliefs were based on like cures like. And so if a plant looked like a part of the body or looked like a symptom, in this case cancer, it would be good for curing that cancer. That being said, Western science has looked at it and it does not have any cancer or tumor fighting properties, skin cancer or otherwise. So bummer for that. But when it shows up, it forms this purple layer over the soil, and it's very distinctive. Nothing else really looks like it. If you go to the Foraging Texas website, you'll see more pictures of it. But once you see it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Ooh, a question.
So on top of the things you listed, would a tincture work as well?
Okay, in this case, is that Rick Fast?
Mr. Rust, actually.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right. I figured when it comes to tincture, the research I found, it was all aqueous based. So I would go with that. If you were going to tincture it, I would use a vodka rather than Everclear, just so you have the higher water content. And then it may be shelf stable. But as far as the effectiveness, I'm sorry, I don't know if the tincture, like I said, in the cases, whoops, sorry, wrong one. Yeah, they've all been, the research has been done on aqueous extractions of the plant. So, another question. Oops.
Can you use this in smoothies?
Oops. Yes, this is another great plant for smoothies. When you're eating it, just like if you're using it in a regular meal, non-smoothie meal, I prefer it cooked just because the leaf of the plant is a little bit coarse and a little bit fuzzy. And so raw, I don't like the mouthfeel, the texture of it. But cooking it softens it up, and of course smoothie, blending into a smoothie will completely take out the any of that coarse mouthfeel, but you'll get all the medicinal properties. So yeah, it's a really good plant for a smoothie. It may turn it a little purple, but that's okay. Another question?
Last one. Would mixing lyre leaf root and Carolina geranium root be a good idea for wounds?
Yes, that would be good. And if possible, throw some lantana leaf into it. The lantana leaf has also been found to be a very, very potent, an aqueous extraction of the lantana leaf is found to be a very potent wound healer. So, and if you really want to get into it, then you add some chickweed, for the demulcent effects. There's a lot of good plants. But yeah, the Carolina bristle mallow, Carolina sorry, the Carolina geranium. Uh, I was sorry. Let's rewind. Okay, so my daughter has this horrified look on her face right now. The Carolina geranium, that is a blood stopper. So the dried root of the Carolina geranium will stop bleeding. But then once the bleeding is stopped, you really don't need it in there. So for the first application, when you're still bleeding, yes, a mixture of the lyre leaf sage root and Carolina bristle mallow root powdered mixture together would be good because it would stop the bleeding and then speed up the wound healing. You would probably want to put some antibacterial thing in there too, other than the lyre leaf sage leaves. You want something stronger, going back to the horse mint, let's say. But then once the bleeding is stopped, you really don't need the Carolina geranium root in there. That's why it's good to have lots of different powders available to mix. If you're out in the field, it would be good in your little medicine bag to have the mixture of the Carolina geranium root mixed with the lyre leaf sage root. But at home, keep them separate so you can kind of pick just, why treat a symptom you no longer have? Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, another question.
Should lantana leaf be tisaneed only, or will a tincture work for wounds as well?
Oh, dear God, please do not tincture lantana leaf. Or all parts of the lantana are, well, the leaf, the flower, I'm pretty sure the root, the bark, they are all dangerously fatal. Dangerously fatal. They're very, very poisonous. So you do not want to consume lantana internally. It is strictly for external use. Now, the berries of the lantana were considered a starvation food by Native Americans when there was nothing else available. And I've tried it, boiled one, cooked it. Not good. I can understand why it's survival food. But definitely the leaves and the roots and the flowers, do not tincture, do not take internally. Just use it as an external wash. Very, very, very important. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. So back to the presentation. And since we're at... Hello. Okay.
Was that me?
That was you, yeah. Okay, so again, since we're at the 30-minute mark, I want to do a shout out to Cadenza Coffee, the current and absolutely best supplier of stimulants I currently have in my life. I used to be a rock star energy drink drinker, but Cadenza Coffee takes a thing. I wish you could smell this bag. It's amazing. One of the best things I ever got was a programmable coffee maker. And so every morning at the coffee, when I come down at 5:30 in the morning, the kitchen smells of this wonderful coffee. It's so unlike any other coffee I've had. Just rich flavor and unique. Like I said, he works directly with the farmers, sustainable, all those great things. But his artistry is in blending the beans or not blending the beans. Some of the beans he purchases don't need blending, but he's also really good at just some absolutely fantastic combinations. He asked me if I had a dream coffee, what would it be? And I mentioned something kind of a dark chocolatey sort of flavor with cherry. That would be absolutely awesome. And he kind of scratched, thought for a while. And I can see his wheels turning, and I'm really excited because I'm hoping when I go up to pick up the next batch, there'll be some special Merriwether cherry chocolate blend sort of coffee. Can't guarantee it, and if there is, I'll definitely let you know. But hopefully he's working on it. Oh, a question.
So there's two, actually.
Okay.
Liniment for lantana?
Yes, liniment is good, but really the research showed that a simple water extraction of lantana is all you need to extract the medicinal compounds that trigger the speeding up of the wound healing. So really just let it dry, and as needed, crush it up, put it in some hot water, some hot gauze, kind of mixture, make it like a poultice. And that's all you need. Or make the tea and soak the gauze in it and put it on that way. You don't need to make isopropyl alcohol tincture, liniment out of it, and it probably wouldn't work as well. You really, these particular compounds are water soluble. That's what you want. And another one?
So, what about bugs on the plants? Will they just go away, or do we include them?
Foragers have a special name for bugs. We call them protein. So I've never let a bug stop me from messing with a plant. Trying to think. So just to go sideways here for a second. The stink bugs, you know, the kind of the spade-shaped gray thing that spit out this nasty, foul-smelling stuff. When you roast them, they're actually quite delicious. Okay. Any other questions?
No.
All right. If that case, then on to the presentation. Next up is mallow. In particular, the Mallow neglecta and Mallow parviflora. Now, these are, in Texas, I find them basically starting in the Giddings area and then moving off through the hill country all the way out into New Mexico. So they don't seem to be in the East Texas or Gulf Coast region as much. Sorry, correction. They are down in the like Corpus Christi area, but for some reason, right around the Houston area, they're not really there or out in East Texas. Now, once you head north, like I say, once you get north of the, if you imagine Giddings was a line through Texas, north of that, it starts showing up very plentifully, all the way up into Alaska. But for the Houston area, not so common, but up in the hill country, very, very common. And why aren't you going forward? Okay. So the mallow leaves, if you're familiar with the marsh mallow and some of the other mallows, you know that they are a demulcent. They are heavy with a mucilaginous material, think a slime, similar to aloe vera. So a poultice of the mallow, either the leaves, I should also include the root here, but in these particular mallows, the root is very small, whereas the leaves are very plentiful. So it's easy enough just to make a poultice from the leaves and leave the root behind to keep putting out more of these leaves. But as a demulcent, as this kind of mucilaginous material, it's good for surface wounds, soothing inflamed skin, and then if you consume it, so either just eating the leaves or taking it as a tea or tisane, it's really good for just any sort of inflammatory issues in the gastrointestinal tract. So sore throat, stomach ulcers, acid reflux, all the way out the end of the hemorrhoids, basically. It's a very soothing component. If you're familiar with slippery elm, and the properties of slippery elm, think of it as a weedy form of slippery elm. Find it in the spring through the winter, so pretty much all year round. It just doesn't seem to go away. A hard frost will knock it back some, but generally it's always just there, kind of in the waste areas. It likes ditches. If you look at the name Malva neglecta, it likes neglected areas. This plant thrives on abuse. So ditches, driveways, any sort of soil, bare soil, a little bit of bare soil, and it's probably going to be growing there. Really, really good plant. It's also very, very nutritious, just eaten, as a spinach substitute. But from the medicinal side, it is the demulcent, which is just a fancy way of saying a good layer of slime that helps soothe inflamed tissues. No questions? All right. Okay, the thing you need to make sure, though, is that you don't mistake it for the creeping buttercup. And whereas the mallow will have kind of a salmonish red-colored flowers, the creeping buttercup will have yellow. But the main thing is the leaf shape, and it's kind of hard to see. I recommend going to the Foraging Texas website or other places where you can see better pictures of the creeping buttercup. But it has kind of the rough same shape. But you don't have a thing here. If you look at the center picture, you'll see that the creeping buttercup is a very spread out plant. It's very leggy, a lot of space between the stems. Whereas the mallow is a very thick plant. It's very close together, lots and lots of plant material. Also, if you look at the leaves of the mallow, they're kind of shaped like a scallop, but they don't have deep lobes, indentations in them. Whereas, it's kind of hard to see in these pictures, but in the creeping buttercup, the leaves actually do have deep indentations. Now, if you accidentally consume creeping buttercup, first off, it's going to taste horribly bitter. So if you get some of the green stuff and try it, it's going to taste horribly bitter. And the two poisons, it has two poisons in it. One is simply ethylene glycol, so antifreeze. And so all the bad liver damaging things of antifreeze. But the other component in it, it has some chemicals that make mammals hyper photosensitive. I joke in my classes that basically the creeping buttercup turns you into a redhead. Because if you consume creeping buttercup and then go out in the sun, you immediately start to blister and big second degree burns basically from the sun. This is a big problem in livestock, so goats, sheep, horses that get a hold of some of the creeping buttercup, that then when they go out in the sun, their eyelids burn off, their lips burn off, they stop eating, and pretty much they die. A year, maybe 2 years ago now, in the woodlands, there was a case at stables, I'm not sure which one, but they got some hay that had some creeping buttercup in it, and they lost a number of horses to it. The only thing you can do if you consume the creeping buttercup is just stay indoors for weeks and avoid the sunlight. You know, basically pretend you're a vampire for about 6 weeks and you'll be okay. But most people, the flavor of the creeping buttercup is so harsh that they can't eat it. But it's something you need to know if you're out there foraging, how to tell the difference. Question? Oh, question. Yes.
Are there commercially available mallow species with similar effects that you'd recommend?
Ooh, good question. So the most common mallow species, well, there's three that I can think of. For landscaping, easy to find, easy to buy in the Texas area, Turk's Cap. So the Turk's Cap, here, let me go to foraging Texas. The Turk's Cap, it's in the mallow family. The root in particular has the mucilaginous material. But I'm trying to, so this is the Turk's Cap. The Turk's Cap leaves, when they're young, have some of the mucilaginous material, but the root is better. Unfortunately, with Turk's Cap, then to get the root, you have to dig up the plant. So, you know, get a lot of the Turk's Cap. I've found this for sale at Home Depot and Lowe's, and you know, but you're better off going to one of the local small family-owned nurseries. The soil is usually higher quality, isn't sprayed with pesticides, which if you want the root, you don't want the pesticides. So that's one. The other is the marshmallow. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, and you can find the marshmallow for sale. And again, the young leaves, but in particular the root of the marshmallow, has the mucilaginous effect. So the original marshmallows of confectionery fame were basically a whipped up meringue made from the mucilaginous material extracted from the marshmallow root. So basically just some marshmallow root boiled in water, strain out the root, toss in some sugar, whip it up, toast it in the oven a bit. There's directions. John Callis has a good book where he goes into details on how to make, you know, real marshmallows from the marshmallow plant. But it does have, the root does have the mucilaginous stuff. And of the three, the marshmallow root is probably your best choice. And you can find this for sale at different nurseries, not the big box, not Lowe's, not Home Depot, but I've seen it, I want to say at the Arbor Gate in Tomball, and a few, Moss Nursery usually has it. The marshmallow, it does like wet areas, hence the name. It likes to be growing right on the edge of a pond, so you need some wet soil to grow it.
One
Question.
more question. Can creeping buttercup be used as antifreeze for other practical applications?
Okay, back in, I want to say sometime between 1972, or sorry, 78 and 82, the movie Iceman came out starring Jeff Bridges. And in that, the scientists found a caveman frozen in a glacier that when they defrosted was still alive. And when they looked in his stomach, what he had been eating, they found quite a bit of buttercups, the creeping buttercups. And so the scientists deduced that the antifreeze in the buttercups basically kept the caveman, in a sense of stasis in the ice. This does not work. No, the amount of ethylene glycol, it would take a lot of buttercups to, like cool your car engine. So, no, not going to work, unfortunately. So, sorry. Anything else?
What about okra plants? Same family, right?
Yeah, so okra, yeah, I was so focused on wild plants, but yeah, the slime from okra is actually the same thing that's in the other mallows, because yeah, okra is a member of the malva family. The hibiscus is too, so yeah, the okra pods and the young leaves, the okra flowers all have different levels of that demulcent material and will work in the same way. But where's the fun in growing okra when there's all these wild plants you can have?
We're all
Anything else?
good.
All right. So where are we? 846. Moving on. Milk thistle. So this again, it's a lot more common up in the hill country. That's normally where I find my milk thistle. A little bit out in East Texas, like in the Palestine area, up Jackson, that sort of place. But more often up like in the Enchanted Rock area, hill country area, out that area. It's a very distinctive plant. It is a thistle. It's very, very, very thorny, but the leaves have, it looks like milk was spilled in the vein areas. And then the flower you can see is purple. So really the whole plant is exceptionally good for liver issues. So the flowers, leaves, stem, and seeds. The highest potency is in the seeds of the milk thistle. In fact, currently the only medication that they can give for certain types of mushroom poisoning where the liver is being destroyed is an extract from milk thistle. Now you can buy milk thistle seed extract even in Walmart in the health food section and the vitamins and so forth there. But it grows wild here and it grows very easy. I have grown it in the Houston area, so it's not native to the Houston area, but it does fine here. So the seeds are what you want to collect, and from them, again, if you have liver issues, you would take tisane, or you would crush up the seeds. In the case of the seeds, since it is a harder material than leaves, you would boil it, and then let the water cool. Boil it for about 10 minutes is the standard sort of thing, and then drink it. So if you have cirrhosis of the liver or anything like that. Now, keep in mind, if you are using the milk thistle extract in this manner, let your doctor know, because liver issues are not something to play around with. So this can help, but let your doctor know that you're taking it, just so that he or she is aware of any thing that well, they should always know what herbal supplements you're taking, just so if they're recommending some, they're prescribing some medication and you're taking the herbals, and so like you're getting a double dose of this effect. Too much medicine is as bad as not enough medicine. So you want to make sure everything you're doing is balanced with your doctors. Okay, thank you. Now there is a mimic called prickly poppy, which also has medicinal benefits. So we'll talk about that later on when we get to the peas part. But prickly poppy, it does not do anything for the liver. The prickly poppy is more a sedative and pain relief sort of thing. But you'll have to wait until we get to that one. Okay, mullein. Mullein is a great plant. This is one of the plants that I get asked a lot about by people. It seems like a lot of people don't recognize the plants around them anymore. And so if there's something unusual or a very distinctive plant, that usually catches their eye, and then they email me asking what it is. So the mullein, also known as Indian tobacco, it is kind of a gray, fuzzy plant. Some people mistake it for lamb's quarter, the landscaping plant. But it's a bit bigger. It's a 2-year life cycle. So hopefully you can see the picture here. The first year it just forms this basal rosette. All the leaves coming from a center taproot. And then the second year is when it puts up these tall spikes and more leaves and flowers and produces the seeds. So in this picture here, or these two pictures, this is the second year growth, where you can see the flowers are the yellow flowers on the upper stalk of the mullein. But the flowers, the leaves, the stem, and the seeds are all really, really excellent for respiratory issues. Actually, this would probably be a good one for the cedar fever, because the mullein is found up in the hill country. More in the grassy field areas rather than hard rock type areas, but you can find it up there. I know on the 27th, I'll be up in Driftwood, Texas. And they have mullein growing on their property at the Vista Brewing there. Okay, so respiratory issues. This is where it's a star for pretty much anything that has anything to do with your sinuses down through your lungs is where you want to take mullein for, because it helps with all that. It's also an anti-inflammatory, which helps soothe the inflamed throat tissues, antimicrobial, so not antiviral, but it is antimicrobial. So if you have a sort of bacterial infection, it will help with that. It's an expectorant, so it will help you cough up the phlegm and the nasty lung cheese. And then an infused oil of it is used for earaches. So how do you use it? You can make a tisane or a tea, but a tisane from the flower, the leaves, the stem, the seeds, all those mixed together, or individually, whatever you have access to. And that will give you all these properties. You can also tincture it. Yay, tincturing. And then doing the infused oil. And it was also smoked, hence the name Indian tobacco. There's one of the number of plants that is called Indian tobacco. Important side note. A lot of people out in the wild see it. It has big leaves. They're nice and soft and fuzzy, and they think, wow, this will make great toilet paper. And then if they use it as that, they discover how wrong they are. The fuzzy, soft leaves, or the little fuzziness, is actually due to thousands of tiny little needles that are brittle and break off and embed themselves in soft tissue. So on your hands and so forth, it's fine. Your hands are tough. It doesn't embed in that. But more sensitive parts of your body, it will, and then you spend several days feeling like you just wiped with fiberglass. Okay, so this is a spring, summertime plant showing up in early spring. I don't know if it'll be out there. I mean, January is still really winter. But like I said, I'll be out at Vista Brewing on the 27th. Those classes are filled up already. But at this point, we're at 8:53. So let me jump over to the Foraging Texas website for a minute. And whoops, go the other way. Just mention upcoming classes. So you can register these classes through the links here on the Foraging Texas website, www.foragingtexas.com. On the 26th, Saturday the 26th of January, I will be at the Nature Discovery Center in Bel Air, Texas, which is really downtown Texas. I believe there's still some openings for that plant walk. It'll be a 4-hour walk around their property. They have about almost a city block of great woods and plants and gardens and all sorts of really excellent stuff. And then the following day, I'll be out in the hill country out at Vista Brewing. Like I said, you can check, but when I looked earlier today, all those slots were taken up, but there will be more classes at Vista Brewing throughout the year. Then also back in Houston in February, I'll be at the Houston Arboretum, and then April and May. So February, April, and May, I will be at the Houston Arboretum, and I'm also currently working on getting some classes up in the Dallas area, out at Cato Mounds. Oh, I need to put that on here. So I'm traveling, but go to Foraging Texas to find the upcoming classes. Was there a question? Questions?
Are the mullein leaves still fuzzy in year 2?
Yes. So even in year 2, the mullein leaves are fuzzy and still be able to use for medicine. Once they start to get brown and dried and tattered, that's when they're no longer useful. But year 1 and year 2 both, they're good as long as the leaf itself is in good shape.
All right. Can you mix it with goldenrod for a tea?
Oh yes, that's a great way of using it because it will, the goldenrod helps with things like runny noses and some soothing, but the mullein goldenrod mixture is a really good. When I was talking earlier about too much medicine, that won't be too much medicine. It's a good combination for taking care of the whole body. Okay, so like I said, now that I'm, at the middle age part of life and I've had a lot of experience, I try and share this experience with you all. And I have a good one for you today. Simply this: it's never too late to plant a tree. It is never too late to plant a tree. No matter how old you are, you will reap the benefits from planting a tree. Now, when I'm talking about a tree, yes, I'm talking about an actual plant put in the earth and eventually growing. But I'm also talking about a tree of knowledge. It's never too late to start learning things, or attempting a new skill, or doing a new activity, or just trying something new. Each of those is planting a tree. It might grow into something awesome. If you're not familiar with Ken Cram, on Facebook and on YouTube, Ken Cram, Kenkramm. Look him up on YouTube. He's this wonderful fellow. I've been friends with him for over a decade. And he is out there. He's in his late 70s. He might be approaching 80 now. But he has all sorts of wonderful videos on wilderness camping that he did not start doing until he was in his 70s. That's when he started going out and videoing how to do different, camping tricks that he's been doing for multiple decades. He's an excellent teacher. Some people refer to him as the Mr. Rogers of the woods. But Ken Cram, he's a role model of just going, I don't know how much time I have left, so let's do something good with it. Let's improve myself and let's improve the world. So, and that's the thing, no one knows how much time you have left. And so a young person planting a tree, maybe they will get to sit under the shade, maybe they won't. But even if they don't, someone else will. So, and then with the knowledge, same thing. Like what I've been doing. I didn't start, I was foraging all my life, but, teaching about it, I didn't start until my mid-40s. And I plan on doing this now until basically they drag me off and throw me in prison or something like that. But yeah, it's never too late to plant a tree. If you keep thinking, I'm too old to go to school, it takes too much time to do this, it takes too much time to do that. All you have is time. So use it in a way that makes you better. Because the thing is, a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now, where will you be if you didn't start tomorrow or tonight? So plant a tree, folks. Okay, at this point, we are at the end of the show. Thank you very, very much for attending. Quick jump over to Merriwether. And so we'll see you next week. Same plant place, same plant channel. Also, I'm going to be posting some questions. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, is there an interest of doing this in front of a live audience? And a few things like that. All right. Good night. Have a great life.